back with episode. What is this? Four, I believe.
Yes.
Welcome to the Spaceship with Ollie and DLO. And so today we're going to be talking about I like to term it as the sacred uh, self marriage or the marriage of yourself. And that is to say, looking in within and combining both your ego and what did we call it? The light, or what was the other one we called it? The ego and the what?
Shadow. It would be the shadow.
Shadow, the ego and the shadow, combining those two, alchemizing them, and yeah, just kind of internalizing the self uh, marriage, I guess to say, whatever. Do you want to open up? Because I know this was your topic, and so I'm sure you have a lot to say.
Sure. Yes. So, um, I did ask on threads. Do you people think that everybody has both the masculine and the feminine energies within them? And it was 100% yes. So, by popular demand, here's the topic on that. Um, I believe that we everybody has both the masculine and feminine energies, and what that means to every individual is different. But essentially, you can have any uh, what would that be? Personality trait, I guess, at all. It doesn't matter. It's regardless of your gender. Everybody can be courageous. Everybody can be delicate. Everybody can be silly. Everybody can be all of these things that we usually associate to gender. Everybody's capable of being that. Um, Now, there is a part in the spiritual journey, I believe, and this is based on my experience, in which you have to acknowledge the part that you don't put any light on. That's a vague way to say it. The part that you suppress. So, for example, most straight men inhabit their masculine for most of their life, and many of them completely neglect their feminine, either out of a survival need or just because that's the way that they were taught. Uh, but just because we don't do something doesn't mean that it's impossible or that it's not there. We can, I believe that we can all acknowledge the very first point, which is that we do have both masculine and feminine energies within us. But like I said, because we grow up in a certain way, we learn to suppress the other one. So, in the journey of reintegrating yourself, of becoming whole, seeing your entire self, well, you eventually have to see the part that you never wanted to see. Um, and that's usually it transcends the gender thing. Like it's everything. The parts that, for example, if you were taught to always be a people pleaser, there is um, certainty and self assurance and all of these things that you were taught to repress, but they live within you. Um, and so that's essentially what the sacred marriage is when you understand that you've been identified with one thing and then realize that one thing, that characteristic or attribute, for example, kindness, has an opposite, and that would be, say, rudeness or hatred. And we are very much capable, and we have been on that side of the spectrum. But because we have this pressure, external pressure to meet a very specific way of living. For example, for a people pleaser, to be kind to others, to be nice to others. When we are not nice, we tend to suppress that and not think about it. And so the marriage would be to bring both of those polarities, the kindness in you and also your ability to hate, and understand that they both live within you and accept them. That's essentially it. Just accepting that that you're not just one thing, that there's always a polarity to anything that you could call yourself, and you are most likely you have exhibited that. If any of that makes sense, right? Because that was like the first time that I put it in that way.
No, it does 100%, and I'm gonna add on to that. So there's a story. And it goes like this: a grandfather was telling his two grandchildren about wolves, and the premise ends up being that the grandchildren ask the father, well, which wolf survives? And his answer is, and I'm sure everybody out there has probably heard this, and if not, just search up grandfather wolf story, you'll find it. The answer ends up being the wolf that you feed is the one that survives. And so let's go back to the gender thing when you say a lot of people attribute feminine and masculine energy or traits or whatever to honestly just being a man or a woman. And kind of how you said, this transcends that. Like, this isn't to deal with that at all. Anybody could be angry or happy. Anybody could be or kind or rude or happy or sad. Those are quite literally the wolves. And so when you're in touch with your masculine versus your feminine more, depending upon whatever one it is that you're feeding, say that being angry, if you're more in touch with your feminine, then maybe you might not necessarily exhibit much anger as opposed to if you were more in touch with your masculine. And then just me being a quote, quote, I would say typical masculine man, I exalted or exhibit, or even not even to say exhibited more masculine traits. I just fed the wolf that was more masculine throughout my whole life, and so for me, it resulted in me looking at things from a more, uh, it sounds very vague, but a more masculine kind of mask, if you will. And so, speaking upon my personal experience with the sacred marriage of these two sides, I do like to look at it more of like the balancing of the ego scale. And I was just telling Ollie about this. My ego for me, because I look at ego as two ways. Well, let's take a look at this. First, I like to categorize what kind of ego. There's the ego that's like, man, Ollie ain't better than me. I should have like, I'm better than him. I shouldn't have lost to him. And then there's that's like the ego of uh, you're not better than me, person to person kind of thing. Then there's the self ego, the ego of like, I give it to Ollie, he beat me, and then when I'm training by myself, I'm like, I need to be harder on myself. I need to be better. There's no way he beat me. That's like the self ego. Regardless of whatever ego you are dealing with, I like to look at the ego from two perspectives. And again, this comes from the masculine, the feminine, the left, the right. And this is something we'll touch within this podcast episode as well, but polarity or duality. And so for me, my ego was never like, I'm better than you. I deserve the light. It was more like, oh man, to be honest, I don't even know if I should fucking be here. Like, I don't know if I'm good enough for this. And so for me, it was kind of almost to say, climbing the mountain down, I'm not really sure if I'm going to be able to get down. When a lot of people are looking to climb up, they're like, oh, I'm going to be the first up the mountain. And not to say like being at the mountain means victorious or success. No, I'm just giving an example. When you're coming down from something, you're kind of cautious. You're like, I don't really know if I could get down. Like, it was easy to get up, but I don't know. But when you're climbing up, you're like, oh, fuck yeah, like I'm going up. And so for me, when I'm looking at, come back to the point, when I'm looking at the duality of the sacred marriage of self, it's really important that we find a balance or we find a line to walk on. And I was thinking this before we hopped on and pressed record, Ollie. But it's almost to me like once you find that, that might be what you could consider maybe in a way, it wouldn't be exactly spiritual alignment or spiritual enlightenment, but it's almost like a spiritual enlightenment in a way. Once you can find a way, and this is what I said before we pressed record, I asked Ollie, I said, well, what about feeding both wolves at the same time, right? You're telling me to pick a side. Why can't I just choose both? And so his answer was, you only can feed both once you've fed one and realize the other one is hungry. And I was like, well, yeah. But anyways, that is to say, that's just my thoughts on that as well.
Yes, alchemical marriage. And I am a firm believer that every framework or spirituality works. So it's more about the commitment of the person, right? More than the structure itself. So many approach it differently. This idea at least for me, it came from alchemy. That's the whole point of alchemy: marrying the left and the right, the sun and the moon, the feminine and the masculine. And you can't get there without being spiritual, or at least not spiritual, introspective, um, and understanding that yes, those two polar opposites live within you, and you can, in fact, inhabit both of them.
Right. And so that brings me to what I just brought up, which is duality and polarity. And so to me, duality is separation and polarity is relationship. Or like to say duality is black versus white, and I don't know why I'm like tripping up on this word right now. Polarity is black and white, togetherness. And so I want to hear your thoughts on duality and how the duality of both sides play into each other.
Um, so let's first get a definition on duality, I suppose. So I think it's hard to differentiate it from polarity.
Well, I'll throw my 2 cents in
Mm-hmm.
and then let you answer. To me, duality is like the illusion of two things that are opposite and they're disconnected. So we're thinking of like these two wolves, right? They are not together.
Uh,
One, we'll just use anger and happiness or happy, sad. One is on one spectrum, one is on the complete other. So to me, that's duality. And polarity is like, I don't want to say togetherness, but it's like the dance between the two, like a union, almost to say like north and south or inhale, exhale, sun and moon. Like though like they go together, if that makes sense.
yes, definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like for example, there's no north without south. That would be polarity.
Right,
Um,
right.
I see, I see. So yes, duality. I think it's just very hard to conceptualize these things. So when it comes to like everything, essentially, to me, the way that I see things, and this is like, I guess, a personal thing, but it comes from all the studies that I've done. Everything lives within a spectrum. There is no black and white, or black versus white. Um, there is black and white, and all the ranges of color in between. So with that said, I think that kind of, I don't know. I just, duality and polarity. I know exactly what you mean. It's just that when I
You see them as
understand,
the same, maybe.
yeah, when I understand polarity, then I'm like, why then do I need duality? You know?
And you know what? I think actually, and let me say this as well. I think that it's important to realize because we mistake that they are separate. I mean, genuinely, duality is the recognition that, or rather, I should say, duality, when understood properly, becomes damn, I just can't say this word today. Polar, you know what I'm
Polarity.
trying to say.
Yes.
Yes, they are not opposite, but they are complete together. Um, but anyways, the reason why I asked that though is because to me, I feel like what a lot of people do is they treat them like they don't go together. That was ultimately going to be my point that I came back to.
Ah,
Um,
yes.
like they don't have to go together. I can be only a masculine. I can be only a feminine. They treat them as if they are two completely separate sides and they don't ever have to cross, let alone they don't ever even have to get close to each other. And so I want to talk more about that,
Yeah.
more than the actual duality versus polarity.
All right. I see it. I see it. I see it. So, yeah, and honestly, just whenever you interact with somebody else, you very easily come to the conclusion of whether a person is able to see past that, past duality, meaning, um, well, I like to think of it as black and white thinking, black versus white thinking, meaning yes versus no. There's only those two options, and that's I have to choose either or, because that's like, oh, this might sound rude, but it's very elementary way of thinking. And the thing is that this is what we're taught in schools, right? And not a lot of people go beyond that, because for many, many, many reasons, right? But one of the most is that it's just resources are so hidden from us, um, so that it seems that they're not there, but they're always there. And so, yeah, that's just to say that most people do operate in like, I gotta choose either yes or no, black or white, up or down. But then there's also like, do you even need to climb right now? Can you just go around? That kind of thing.
And why don't you think people really, do you think it has more to do with just the way that the world is? Why they don't ever look to say, well, I can just go around this obstacle? Because that, and let's
No.
pause real quick. That's such a great point. A lot of people come to an obstacle and just stop,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh my god, and this is something that's been coming to me on my self reflections a lot, because my mom, that's like one of her most popular sayings, I guess. Um, she says, Se te cierra el mundo, which means your world becomes so small, meaning all the options that you actually have in front of you to take, you don't see them because you're so in your head that you think yes or no. And so, well, to answer your question, I don't think it's just from the way of the world, but I'm trying to not be too, I don't know, rude to people, because I could really go off on things, but I'm trying not to.
Oh, unfiltered, because they got to hear it. And let me just say this as well before you go in. Um, to be honest, it takes, and let's really think about this. If we're feeding one wolf, that means one is starving. And
Mm-hmm.
if anybody's ever been starving, you'll know, whether it's intentional or purposeful, you'll know, like, to starve is not fun. And so I'm saying that because, I mean, if you're going to be rude, there's a wolf that's starving over there and he needs food. So your medicine, your food is your word. So give your word.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot of effects to starvation. I mean, you go down to desperation because you need to eat, otherwise you're gonna die. And so I this is what I would call like when your shadows are projected, because a lot of the things, for example, like I said, a lot of people demonize things such as their anger, right? Because they were taught to be kind people, but everybody gets angry. But some of us were taught that anger is bad and you can suppress it. So when you suppress that, when you starve that wolf, um, and it's not like, I'm not saying that not giving into anger, but ignoring the fact that you are angry, right? Not feeling that emotion. Um, when you starve it, you will get to a point where it itself can no longer keep up with your willingness to starve it. It will bite you. It will feed itself, and that's when I like what many of us have experienced as like dark nights of the soul, when we repress something so deeply, and then it shows up and we don't know how to deal with it. Um, but yeah, that's a great point to bring up, the fact that you are starving it. You're starving one of the two wolves, so it's going to have to eat eventually.
And we should just refer to these wolves as the masculine and the feminine. Um, and so beyond just being a man or a woman, what would you say really mean? What does it mean, to be a feminine, to be a masculine? We kind of touched on it in the opening, but what does it really mean? What does that mean? Let me embrace my masculine. If you said that to me, what does that mean?
So it's just so multi-layered, because you can essentially boil everything, every characteristic of humans, to the scale of black and white. So, black being the subconscious, the feminine, the receptive, all of these words that we can use that are very much correlated to our understanding of the feminine force, the nurturing, the soft, not soft really. Hmm, I don't really know where softness would be. Generally, we attribute it to the feminine, right? But amongst many other things. So those would be some of the characteristics of the feminine. mostly nurturing and reciprocal. Not reciprocal. Receptive, meaning that you receive. And then the opposite, the masculine, is mostly um, there's so many. I'm trying to narrow it down. Projection, essentially, exerting instead of receiving. You give and you take. So giving would be the masculine, and taking would be the feminine. And see, this is why I say that it's like multi-layered, because you see it in everything. There's, I believe that everything has the duality, right? The two poles. But there's also the in between. Nonetheless, the two poles exist, and you can see that on everything. There's almost nothing that exists without an opposite. Not that I can name.
Right.
So yeah.
And
Uh,
so speaking, or go ahead, go ahead.
no, no, you go ahead.
I was just say, speaking of the traits, I think it's also important to highlight maybe the healthy traits too of these energies. And so to me, healthy masculine energy would be like and because let's take it back a step. If somebody says to me, you need to embody more masculine traits, well, it's like, what does that mean? And so that's kind of what I'm saying here. To me, the masculine would be like more structure, discipline, direction, and protection. And then for feminine, it'd be more things like nurture, like your ability to nurture a thing, your intuition, your creativity. And so this is something that I'm super big on. My dad, and so we spoke about the lion and the or the lion and the lamb before we hit record as well. And so for me, I view my mom as the lamb and my dad is the lion. And so obviously being the child, it's almost like you're walking the middle of both your parents, alchemizing both those energies and turning them into one. And so for me, I feel like a lot of men go without, I feel like they have a father wound in two ways. Either there's the absent presence of a father, and so what is filled is maybe not necessarily the best characteristics of a man. You might find yourself lying, stealing, cheating, inflicting pain upon others, and especially women. Um, but on the opposite side, there are present fathers who do instill in the man to be tough. And for me was my dad's kind of infliction on me was like, get up, brush yourself off, you're fine. But thankfully, I also had my mom, which was like the lamb, and she taught me the importance of having a heart, having compassion, showing a soft side, being gentle, having forgiveness, and just to be, call it what it is, to be soft. And there's nothing wrong with being soft at all. Um, but which brings me back to my point of I feel like too many men or almost all men in society now are pushed to only show the masculine side or feed the wolf that is masculine, and in turn that feminine wolf dies. And so they have no intuition, they have no discernment, they have no ability or capability to cater to anybody outside of themselves. I mean, just honestly, everything a woman would do. And even in this society, we'll say, well, those are things women are supposed to do. But in my opinion, when we look at the most noble of men throughout time, and when I say most noble, I don't mean the most hard or the most celebrated. A noble man to me, and this is going to sound so cliche and just like, obviously or duh, but a man who embodied both to me is obviously Jesus. The ability to walk both lines. I can put fire to your ass, but I'm also sticking my hand out to help you up. I feel like too many men stick to the I'm going to put fire to your ass. They don't worry about let me help you up. Let me have compassion. Let me look outside myself to see someone else and how I can help them. It's always how can I get around this person, even if they're sitting down and I'm stepping over them. I'm just getting past them.
Yes. Yeah, that's very common.
And so, what would you say we can do to identify these within ourselves? Like, say, if someone on either side, if you're a man and you're more feminine and you're looking to embrace your masculine, if you're a man and you're more masculine looking to embrace your feminine, for the females or ladies rather, if you're feminine and you're looking to embrace your masculine or opposite, what would you say, or even to say not there that there's something, but for you personally, what kind of happened that made you start realizing, okay, I need to look into feeding this other wolf?
Well, my life falling apart. That's what pretty much pushed the buttons. Um, so for me, hello world, I'm queer. So I grew up very much. This was the family setting. My mom was the leader of the family. It was a matriarchal home. My dad was kind of absent, but not really. He was emotionally absent, but in every other regard, he was very much an attentive parent. Um, so when it came to dealing with my emotions, I only learned to do it in the feminine way. And many of the things that I was supposed to learn from my dad, such as leadership and all of that, I learned from the feminine way, right? My mom. And so for me, being a man, you usually do struggle with getting in touch with your emotions, but I also struggle with like all of these other masculine traits that I didn't know how to um, employ in this very patriarchal and hyper individualistic society. So I always felt inadequate. And when my life started to fall apart because I didn't know how to administer myself as an adult, I didn't learn the right tools from my parents, so I had to learn them on my own. But I understood that I was falling way shorter than I needed. That's why my whole life fell apart. Um, well, that's kind of the answer to your question. It's like sometimes life is just gonna push the right buttons and you just gotta listen or keep lying to yourself and putting yourself on the same cycle of the same choices under the same you trip under the same what? You trip over the same rock. And that's just like a personal thing, I guess, because we've all been there. I believe we've all been there, but it's like there's only so much I can tell people. It's really about listening to the signs, because if you keep on getting on the same circumstance, if you keep on complaining on the same circumstance, well, you gotta understand that there's choices you're making that put you there. Like not everything is up to your control, but there's a lot of things that you have control over, and if you don't make the choices, then you're gonna keep on that cycle. So that's the answer, right? The Because you can do a lot of introspection, but when real life hits you, that's the real test. How are you in responding to that? And so when my life came crashing down, I understood I am not stepping up to my own masculine traits, which are leading myself through life first and foremost, um, having a structured administration for my own time and energy, uh, having the self assurance of yes, I can do things, and if I don't, if I can, then I can learn. All of these things that only came after I realized, fuck, like I'm lacking something. I'm not doing the things that I need to be doing, but I don't know what those things are. Um, yeah. Does that answer?
And yeah, it does. And so I want to share my point of view as well. It really was the same thing. I realized that truthfully, I was running into the same problems, just how you said, tripping over the same rock. I was running into the same problems, and I could never come to the answer why. And I looked at everything, and it wasn't until I realized, well, every single and mine were more specific to a relationship, as in like your partner, like your boyfriend, your girlfriend.
Mhm.
Um,
That would be the
I
most
was running.
common one. Yeah, because I've never struggled. I'm sorry to interrupt, but like a lot of the way that this duality between within yourself represents is in the relationships you keep with the opposite sex. So generally, um, romantic relationships. So go ahead.
And just to build off that, it's what pull kind of in my opinion, it's what pulls it out of you truly. And so for me, that was my experience was I'm the masculine, right? Every day, all day, bright and early, chest out, but the feminine is being pulled out of me, but there is no feminine to be pulled out of me, and so it's lacking. And so in the places that I'm looking for answers, it's like, well, the answer lies in being in more touch with your feminine side. And so at first hearing that, like many men, um, I just really didn't know what that meant outside of being more ladylike, truly. Which in my mind, I was like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but just that that wasn't me. It wasn't until I really started to understand that it meant embodying kind of how we were saying earlier, the qualities or the traits of being more feminine, showing more compassion, understanding how to treat yourself in a, I guess you could say, a softer way, if anything. And so this example just popped in my mind. Um, of my dad showing a more feminine trait or characteristic. There's this one time, and actually I'll share this story. My dad had just punched a hole in the wall or a hole in the door, and he was screaming and arguing with my mom. And in my mind, as a kid, and as a kid you don't know any better, I'm like, well, I want to make my dad happy, so I put on what a cartoon we always watch in the morning and laugh at, Flapjack. Fucking if anybody knows that cartoon. And so we're laying on the couch, and I'm laying on top of my dad, and he's tapping my belly button with his finger. That's something he always would do with me. And just in that moment, though, just that literal interaction, even though 2, 3, 4 minutes of him doing that, it's like, as a man, as tough as my dad is, and as wrong as he was in those times, the duality of the lion, the lamb, it exists in even a man such as my dad. And so for me, I learned to be a man. And my dad would always say this too. This just popped in my mind as well. I would, if you have a sibling out there, whether it's actually, no. If you are a brother and you have a sister, or if you're a sister and you have a brother, you will relate to this. For me, I'd always be like, well, you never let Shay do this. That's my sister's name. I'd always be like, you never let my sister do this, or you never make her do this. Why do I have to do this? And always he would say, once you have a daughter, you'll understand. And I'm probably 11 to 14, he's saying that. As I began to get older, I understood. But from the ages of like 11 to 14, or 10 to 14, I was like just and even right now, I'm having literally a million thoughts go through my mind right now. But bring it back in, he'd always say, once you have a daughter, you would understand. And so for me as a younger person, my dad really instilled into me the lion mindset with the heart of the lamb. Even though my mom was the true lamb and my dad was the true lion, and even my mom was the opposite as well, she was the lamb and instilled in me being the lamb with the heart of the lion. So there is the lion who has the heart of the lamb, and the lamb who has the heart of the lion, and both simultaneously they put that in me. And so in my mind, I'm like, I can have the roar of the lion, but the composure of the lamb, and then on the other side, it's like I can have the appearance of the lamb, but in my heart, the bite or the roar of the lion. And so for me, from a young age, I always was looking at the duality of, I guess to say, the sacred relation of the feminine and the masculine. But like many men, toxic culture, and even just to say friends and people I surrounded myself with, um, I really only poured into the masculine side. I never looked to feed the feminine.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and it's like we all have this struggle, and the thing is, in the healing journey, you have to be honest, because otherwise nobody heals. But you can only see, um, it's kind of that thing. You can only heal the wound if you admit it's there first and foremost. So it's hard to understand that we have indeed been, most of our lives, everybody has been performing an idea of what it means to be a man. But the thing is that that definition we accept as a society, and it's not the only way of being a man. It's just what society wants the idea of man to be. Um, and quite honestly, if you ask any woman who has been in a very happy relationship, whether their man is more masculine or feminine, they will most likely never give you a straight up answer, because they understand that a man can be soft, and a man in his softness alongside with his strength, his presence, his lion essentially, it's just something that you just can't get enough of. It's like the
Right.
win-win. And so, like, why I've met a lot of men like that, and if that's a man that can happen, why do we keep on trying to be something that is so restrictive, that you cannot be soft, you cannot be um compassionate, that you always have to be cutthroat? Like, that's a version of a man, but genuinely, who is happy along that man? Does that man live a happy life? Do the people in his life
Or
actually like him?
or is he just a man? Which is what I always say is like some people get so caught up in being the thing they are that that's all that they are. They are just a man. And just as you said, is your partner even happy next to you, or are you just a man? Are you just that? Are you a man who has people around him who love him, or are you just a man
Mm-hmm.
with the people who are around you, thinking that they love you, but truly they don't?
Yeah, and that's the thing. These type of man, and that's not to point fingers, right? Like, they themselves can get out of that, but while in that, in this toxic masculinity, they understand when people don't like them, but what is the reaction? The fear shows up as aggression, as domination, as you don't get to get away from me, like you are my property, kind of thing.
You also wrote here when you just asked this question of a topic, accepting the other half. And so I really want to get into that as well. Um, the accepting, or even to say, let's first start at the point of realization, which we kind of already covered, but we'll make it a bulleted point here. The realization that something is lacking, more so than saying, when did you find out it was lacking? What did it do to your life when you realized that there was another side that you needed to accept? And maybe to say, touch on it too, how hard it, how hard was it to accept that you needed to embrace the other side, or was it even hard in general for you?
Yeah. So, essentially, what my struggle came down to was that I bit my tongue way too much. That I. Oh, this always makes me so exhausted because just remembering. So, I've always been a person who likes to know better, not to brag on anybody else or to. I don't play those ego games. More to because I understand that the more you learn, the more that you the more perspectives you can see the world through, the better for you and your experience life. So many of the times when I encounter social interactions with other people, it would be like they say things that I'm just like, what are you talking about? But I couldn't say those things out loud because it was considered rude, and I was not supposed to be a rude person. But that's very much a disbalance on the masculine, because when you know your truths, essentially, you better step in your ground. You better stand your ground. You better be yeah, it's just about carrying that presence that you are an individual and you have your opinions, but I have mine, and I know what's best for me. That is the thing that I've always missed, like that assertiveness on my own beliefs and ideas. I always had to censor myself or double think what I say so that I don't come across as this or that. Um, so it was easy for me to accept that that was the way to go, but actually inhabiting it, actually putting into practice that I have to say what I am thinking instead of just thinking it and then arguing with myself after the interaction and getting all these ideas in my head of how I should have responded, right? But it's like, no, baby, it's gone. You should have, but you didn't. And um, the whole journey, how it's looked like for me, is accepting that I fail, and that's something that it's like hard for the masculine, the wounded masculine, to accept that you fail and you pick yourself back up. So even that in and of itself is something that I had to accept, that like I'm not perfect and I'm going to keep on falling and I gotta pick myself back up. Um, it's just, for me it was easy to identify, very hard to put into practice and to embody. Even to this day, I struggle to always express my honest opinion and know when to put my foot forth. But yeah.
I see. For me, it definitely accepting the other half. Um, and now this is to speak from the opposite point of relationship. This is like we were saying earlier, self-ship. And so before we hit record, I was like, to me, relationship is like your relationship with others. And then I was thinking there's a self-ship, which is like the relationship of the ego and then the shadow, which is the self-ship. But um, for me, it was I was going through life and I was getting knocked off my horse and I had to like pick myself up, but not pick myself up like a man and brush myself off. Like, D, you need to come and heal, bro. Like, you need to sit down and like cry. And so, one thing a long time ago, I always would pride myself on, I'd be like, honestly, I haven't cried in X amount of years, or I've only cried 5 times, which was like a true thing. Like, I could have the worst thing you could imagine happen to me, and I wouldn't even shed a tear. But not because I wasn't sad, I just wouldn't cry. Like, I don't know, I just wasn't moved to tears to cry. Um, and so before I became more in touch with my feminine self, I would never cry. But that is also to say, like, I would never really look to heal myself. And so when I started doing shadow work and specifically, and this is something I challenge the listeners to do as well, I started thinking of things as my kid self. When I started doing that, I started finding myself having more tears because I started kind of looking. This is almost what I imagine myself doing, right? And so if you're listening, close your eye. Obviously, you're listening if you fucking made it this far, but close your eyes and I want you to picture yourself doing anything. It could be playing a sport, it could be cooking your favorite meal, it could be with your children, whatever it is. I want you to picture you doing that, and I want you to picture younger you watching you do that. And so I'll do that with anything. I'll be helping the older lady at the store. I'll be helping a young kid. Like the other day, I was walking in the grocery store. I had my glasses on. This young dude had his little glasses on, like the mirrored glasses where you can't see in. I was like, "Nice glasses, bro." He was like, "Thanks." And in my mind, for a split second, I was like, "I wonder what I would have done in that moment." But just that small thing healed my inner child because honestly, that thing happened to me all the time, and so it just brought me back in reflection to a moment like that. But um, to come back to the point, I mean, there's been even just to say within the past year, honestly, is a lot of this growth and healing that I've had. But there were so many points within the past year where it was like the only way to heal that and that being the wound was to get in touch with my feminine, to ask myself, like, D'Angelo, are you really okay? Like, is everything really good going on? Because you only can be tough for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Like, strength and pride and ego from the more dominant side, like, that can only get you so fucking far. And this is to say, you have to have a woman in your life, right? And that's symbolically speaking, the feminine energy, not literally a woman or a lady, but you have to have a woman in your life. You have to be in touch with that feminine. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to. If and that's not necessarily to say for everybody. Not everybody cares to be in touch with their feminine, but I also say not everybody walks the spiritual path. This is more for people walking the spiritual path. You have to be in touch, and even in general, honestly, I take that back. In my opinion, you have to be in touch with both because there is levels of in my mind, this my dad again. He's just coming through. I swear, even though my dad's still here with us, I channel him all the time. My dad calls it being a real ass nigga. Honestly, like that's just what he calls it. And so there is levels that I couldn't get to be a quote quote real ass ninja. Um, there's levels I wouldn't have got to unless I would have touched my feminine side. And that is just to say there isn't levels of healing that I would have came across unless I was in touch with that feminine side.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very important to highlight. Well, many things, but how many men feel very much stuck, very much stagnant, very much they can't go forward. And it's no wonder that when you listen to their stories, it's a very common theme that they don't cry. Not because they don't feel like it, but it's, well, there's many reasons. Not feeling like it, straight up refusing it, being so not in touch with your emotions that you don't know what sadness truly feels like, or you don't have the language to put it into words, but you know it's a feeling there. It's so many different uh, ways that this manifests, but it's no wonder that a lot of men feel stuck because they're not allowing themselves to break through. That's what it means to break down, to break through the. It's essentially coming out of the cocoon that you've been putting yourself in for a long time. Even if it's like a bad situation, you get to a point where you have to break down to understand where your stagnation point is, because it's usually, this is why spirituality is so important. It's just energy that's stuck in your body and you are not allowing it to flow, but yet you want to continue flowing with life. It's impossible. You have to let that stagnant energy out, and releasing it through, there's many ways. Many men choose exercise, which helps, but allowing all the grief, all the sorrow, all the repressed anger that you don't let out any other way, to go out through breaking down and crying. It's very important because I people undermine the power of crying, and that's because we're generally miseducated. But like I said, it literally helps you release all that stagnation that keeps you on the same path of rotten. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that.
I'm I'm ingesting all that. I'm thinking about it, and so I want to come back to the accepting the other half now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when did you really learn to accept it? And not to say accept it, but because I almost want to take a step past that. When did you almost learn to, and I know you're still learning, but to embody it? And when did it become something you actively sought to embody, if it has it all?
Oh, brother. Oh, so like I said, relationships are a perfect opportunity to see that other part. Uh, uh, there's so many. It shows up on every relationship, and that's the thing. Once you get to that point where you need to face the other half, you need to acknowledge it. Jung calls it the anima or the animus, um, that repressed part of your psyche that is the opposite of what you mostly embody. So for me, I mostly embody the feminine. So when I came across the anima, I mean the animus, the masculine internal force, I was so in awe. I was so in awe. I was like, I want to be like him, but I also want to be with him, but I also want to. Oh my God! It
And
was
what is that called again?
the animus. So that's like it's a concept of the internal opposite of what you mostly embody. So what I mean by that is what energy you're mostly on a regular basis. Um, so yeah, uh, I started to recognize it. It's like it's just so hard to distinguish from shadow work because it arises from shadow work when you start to analyze yourself and understand that you're a very complex being. um, just things just start to make sense, kind of thing.
The
Sorry.
puzzle starts to, you start to be able to see the picture of the puzzle kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like I haven't like sat down to think when did I accept it or how did it, because it's like everything is connected. When I work with my shadows, I release a little bit of the suppressed feminine in me or the suppressed masculine in me, and it's never ending.
Like a breakthrough leads to a new higher high of how much more you can use that side, either one.
Yeah, and assertiveness is one thing that I've struggled with a lot, and I've understood that when I let go of certain ideas, right, certain beliefs that I kept from childhood, assertiveness just comes on its own because I no longer have this mental blockage that it stops me from being assertive because I used to believe the world was supposed to be this one way. So essentially, what I'm saying is like, it's not, there's no need to emphasize like, oh, let me get in touch with my other half, as long as you recognize that it's all interconnected. Your many parts of you are not supposed to be put into labels because they don't really make sense to us. And the anima and the animas, this opposing force within you, is one of those things that like, it just comes to you. You know, the more you do the inner work, it just comes to you. You don't have to seek it.
And by it comes to you, you mean like just how you said it just starts to make sense.
Yeah, because you'll find yourself dancing silly sometimes, or just giggling at shit, and then you start to understand, huh? This is normal. You know, like I've always told myself that that's a girly thing to do, but now that I do it, it's like whatever. It makes me joyous, right? Um, yeah, that's what I mean.
Let's see. And so, have you any other points to speak about?
Um, like I said, this is very much from my experience, and it comes from learning about alchemy, which uses the model of the masculine and the feminine and marrying them and accepting them within you. But if you're not into that sort of thing, you can just acknowledge that what you see in others is within you. And, like, for example, the man who sees all these flaws on women, well, that's how you see your inner feminine. It's not like you're making
Wow.
these things up. It's exactly how you see what a woman should be, what a woman is. That's how you see your own inner feminine, and you're just projecting it onto strangers.
I got to write that down. You said how man sees women. That's how his. Yeah, repeat that one more time.
So many men, how they see a woman is how they see their inner feminine, and that this is what cracks me up. There's a subreddit that is called "Are the Straights Okay?" and it highlights like these very interesting way of thinking of some straight people, in which like they claim to love women, but then they attack womanhood. It's like it just doesn't make sense from an outsider point of view, and like I've never been straight, so I don't know how one comes to those conclusions, but it makes sense that when a straight man is hating on women, like, what are you doing really? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But it's exactly because of that, at least in my belief, because they know that there's internal feminine in them, but they've been rejecting it for so long. It's that wolf has been starving for so long that every time they interact with a woman, the wolf comes and attacks because it's hungry.
Wow.
And it's no
We. I
one.
would go ahead.
It's no wonder that, because you know how like 2020 forward there was all these podcast bros, these losers making podcasts about women, shitting on women. Oh, that whole era. Um, it's no wonder that it's a social phenomenon. A lot of men have been suppressing their inner feminine, and they're out here causing harm to women. It's just, it's sickening.
Which is crazy because it's so, I want to say funny about it, but what's so funny about it for me is like I honestly never understood that. Like to me, there's a point. Some of them, like I understand where they're coming from. Like, okay, I wouldn't want my woman sleeping with a bunch of men. Like I understand that, but the shaming and the taunting of it, I just never really understood that, to be quite honest. Or even to say, not even that portion, just more so the like, I'm better than you because you're degrading yourself.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Um, I understand the not agreeing with the degrading part. Like, in my opinion, I honestly wouldn't want my women or my woman sleeping around with a bunch of people, but not just because it's the woman versus the man. I just wouldn't want my partner doing that regardless if they're a man or a woman. Um, Not that it has anything to do with being a woman, but again, the degradation portion of it, like I'm better than you. Um, I never understood that. I just want to say that.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, and I was gonna say I wish we would have opened up with that because holy shit, dude, there's a bunch of men I could tell you, like a million motherfuckers in my city. I don't even got a million people where I'm from, but and including me at a point as well is that what you see in women or what you nitpick of women truly is just inside of yourself and your feminine wolf that you are not feeding. That is like a bar upon bars right there. And so let me ask you this: as a gay man, you probably pick up the traits that men lack in the feminine aspect, almost to say like you got goggles on and you're looking through a wall and can see x-ray. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's a combination of both being queer and an introverted person. Because I'm mostly an observant. That's how I grew up. I was just in places watching people being themselves. Because this is what an introvert does. He just observes. And the thing is that there's so many. The patterns are so easy to see once you start to recognize them. Like the they're so easy to see. Um, but it's all the same. It comes from the same origin of I'm just projecting some bullshit onto you, and it can either be. I wanted to add this. It can either be the fact that they're rejecting their inner feminine or their mother wound. That's another
Mm.
topic in and of itself. Um, but
A
yeah,
lot of men are scarred by their moms.
uh-huh, and they don't see women as individuals. Like every individual has their own personality, their own life, like their own history. They see them as a projection of their mother. That's another topic in and of itself. And we've been going on hard on men. I want to make it clear women do this too. This is not a gender thing, it's a human thing. Like we all project bullshit onto other people. But based very much on my experience, this is what I've been talking about.
I mean, we're both just men. Like
That's it.
honestly,
That's
we're
it.
just both dudes. Um, yeah, shout out the women out there. Some of y'all are, I ain't gonna lie to you,
We
but
can all
obviously
be
we're not
shitty, regardless of our gender.
right. Dudes are probably like, fuck, these dudes, it might be sexist, bro. Like, no, we're just motherfucking dudes,
Anti-man.
bro.
No, and that's the thing. That's something that if anything, I want to say at the very last. Um, we need accountability. The patriarchy is a thing, and we are very much socialized or groomed to think against our own interest, our own best interest, and we need accountability from other men, pointing out our bullshit so that we can start healing. Because otherwise, it's just a circus, clowns doing clownery shit, and nobody's saying anything about it. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that.
And honestly, I feel like it is another thing that kind of goes into, well, we actually didn't touch on this literally at all. So I just want to say this. Accountability is very important when it comes to both feminine and the masculine aspect of everything. And so you did say this, and I forgot to interject. Um, there is looking at both, how do I put this? I'm trying to figure out the way I want to say this exactly. You can look at an energy from both perspectives of feminine and masculine. And so I think you were saying something to the effect that you learned leadership more so from your mom rather than your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what's coming to my mind right now to say that it's important to realize priority of damn, I'm not gonna lie. This whole time screaming in my mind is like wrap this shit up because you've already fucked up. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna even expand on that. I'm just gonna go straight to these journal prompts that I wrote down. So, anyways, here we go. Here are the journal prompts. As always, these aren't necessarily anything to even concrete have to answer exactly as I'm writing. I'm just putting this out there so your brain can churn and you can get out some of your built up trauma or stress. So here's number one. Who taught you that softness was weakness, and how long have you believed them? Do you lead with control because you're afraid no one will protect you if you let it go? Which version of you is running the show? The wounded boy slash girl, the tyrant king slash queen, or the sacred masculine fast slash feminine? Can you sit fully in your power without needing to dominate, and fully in your love without needing to collapse? When was the last time that, sorry, when was the last time you actually listened to your intuition, not your fear, not your pride, but that quiet, knowing voice? And so a lot of these questions are kind of from the more masculine angle. Again, we are just two men. But especially with that last one, I feel like would be more predicated towards men. Um, and I want to expand on that. Men, it's okay to have an intuition, bro. It's okay to look in yourself and even to say, be a woman at times, to have a softer side. It's okay. The best men of the world are, well, not all the best men. Let me not say that, but most of the men that we look towards are very in touch with their feminine side. And I feel like what a lot of men, honestly, just to call it what it is, the elephant in the room, they feel like it's gay, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And one, there is nothing wrong with being gay in and of itself. But they just feel like it's gay and so they don't do it. But there is nothing wrong with being gay. There is nothing wrong with looking at your feminine side. There is nothing wrong with being in touch with yourself. Um, and so, with that being said, that's all I've got. Are there any other points you wanted to bring up?
Um, uh, well, yeah. Thank you for calling the elephant in the room because, yeah, that's a big issue. And it's a socialized thing. And, yeah, I guess that's what I want to end up with. Most of the things that we talked about here, they were pretty much instilled into you. You learn to view yourself in a certain way as a kid. But as you grow up, you kind of outgrow a lot of those learnings, and there's a whole world in front of you of alternatives, way to see yourself. Um, so it's okay to accept that you are changing.
Right. And, ooh, we might have to make this the second episode. We'll talk about this privately, but the second life. And that's kind of something we were talking about the other day. But in life, I believe that there is a second life. There's the life you live as you're becoming, and there's the life you live as you've became.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in my opinion, once you've become, that is your second life. And so, become what? Become the man who feeds both wolves, not letting one starve and only feeding the other.
Yes, 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 yes. We will have to do an episode on that.
Um, yeah, so I'm good. You good?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, that was episode four. Welcome to the spaceship with Ollie and D-Lo. Thanks for listening. Hopefully the men didn't click off and actually got the message because, well, they probably are like these two gay ass dudes. Even though I love the female counterpart. I won't specify what it's called, but we know what it's called. But yeah, so that's episode four. Thanks for listening, and peace.
Bye.